Hey everyone, it's Rob. I'm back to go over week 5 of our 2-week challenge on the Maffetone diet, or at least a modification thereof. So far, so good. We're continuing. This was as I said, the 5th week. We did the first 2 weeks where you're kind of in the ingestion phase of the process. At the end of that 2 weeks, started some modified 5 and 2 that we looked at. And so I thought it was time to bring you up to speed and sort of start focusing on the longer term benefit of what we're doing. So I'm going to hide my ugly mug here and we'll get right to it. So I haven't really noticed any new or additional changes in terms of the characteristics that I'm feeling on this diet. I've talked about in previous videos generally the improved morale, and that this bullet here is sort of a summation of the increased alertness, decreased hunger, those two big things. The weight loss, these three kind of give you a sense of some degree of control of your destiny, for lack of a better way to put it, and that tends to help improve your morale. When you can stay awake, when you're at work and you're doing stuff that's maybe not the most exciting and you're still reasonably alert, when you're not hungry all the time, wondering, where the next meal's coming from, that kind of thing. And when you see that, by golly, I can control my weight, those things give you a little bit of a sense of control over your life that maybe you didn't have when you were sitting there eating your bonbons on the couch. So that's what the improved morale does. I've mentioned the reflux a couple times now. This is now week 5. This past week I had 1 or 2 minor, basically kind of like that feeling that maybe there was a little bit in the throat and upper stomach area where you're kind of feeling just a little bit. And both of those occurrences occurred after carbo days. My 5 and 2 plan, where I'm, the weekends I'm kind of eating more or less whatever I want. And guess where the acid reflux came in? It was on those days. And it did not result in any actual, acidic feeling in the throat or anything. It was more like just like that, maybe I should take a Nexium kind of feeling. So generally speaking, the 5 and 2 is continuing to keep the acid reflux under control. The minor urges that were sort of noticed came on after basically 2 days of quote normal eating, including carbs. GI distress continues to be minimal. What little there was came on the carbo days as I get used to reintroducing some carbs into the diet. Better sleep continues. So as I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm doing sort of a modification since the end of week 2. Basically at the 15-day mark, and then again at the 20-some day, 22 days and 29 days, etc. Each weekend, starting with the 2nd weekend, 3rd, 4th, and now the 5th weekend, I've allowed a certain amount of carbs and minimal amounts of sugar, like sweet tea or something like that for lunch, a little bit of pasta, things of that nature. And then during the weekdays, I'm kind of focusing on the low carb, no carb mentality. And that has proven to be reasonably sustainable. Have been able to avoid abandoning the plan, for lack of a better way to put it. And so that I think that I'm kind of on to something that's going to work for me over the long term. The decreased weight trend continues, and as I mentioned, there's been a little bit of the increase, comparatively speaking. Overall, GI distress is down, but on carbo days, I still notice a little bit of it. So there's definitely an effect when you quote change your diet from weekdays to weekends, even though it's not a huge change in the diet. So I just posting this again for those of you who may not have seen all of the other videos, the Maffetone.com, and this is where you can go for more information about the test, the 2-week test, and some dietary menu type options. So let's get right down to it. What's the thing that counts? For those of you who've seen my videos before, over here, everything in red represents the baselines, and everything in purple represents actual readings. I'm not going to go over, if you want to see how I came to these baseline weights and baseline blood pressures and things of that nature, go ahead and take a look at one of the earlier videos. But I added a new line into my reference here. My baseline was 195 because that's where I managed to maintain my weight for 10, 15 years prior to COVID. And then COVID, things got out of hand. And so I got up here, 205, 210 range. And we started this at the 208.8 range, right? So getting back to my 195 was my preliminary goal, if you will. And so now I've kind of formally set for myself 185 is my actual goal weight. So I added that line here in green. As I mentioned last week, I did 2 weeks worth of blood pressure and glucose readings just to make sure that nothing unusual was occurring. And you can see the red lines represent my baselines of what I considered desirable or acceptable for glucose and for blood pressure. For the systolic and diastolic pressures, you can see that they were tracking along reasonably well. No sudden, spikes in blood pressure because I was, eating a little more salt than maybe I was previously. Resting heart rate, that was just a general track to make sure nothing was going unusual. If anything, seemed to be improving a little bit as I do additional exercises and things like exercising and things like that. So after those first, 2-3 weeks of tracking this stuff, I was like, okay, I'm not, each one of those glucose strips and the one that I have is about $1 a piece. Like, okay, I'm not going to keep doing this forever. So I just picked up with continuing to track my weight because at that point in the game, so right about here, we had seen the trend of my weight coming down. The first week or two was the most noticeable, right? It was the most dramatic. And then at the end of the 2-week span, I started using the 5 and 2 mentality. Introduced, so at the end of basically on day 15, I had some lasagna or had some fajitas or something. We went to the local Mexican restaurant, had some fajitas. And then that week started the 5 and 2 cycle where during the week, generally I want to keep it as close to 0 carb, 0 sugar as possible. Weekends, eat more or less normal. When I say normal, be able to eat whatever I want. If I'm out and there's a burrito, we want to get a burrito, I can get a burrito. And okay, so I have some rice and a tortilla, big deal, and maybe a sweet tea to go with it or whatever, big deal. What I'm was concerned about is that, one, would I have any physical reactions? Would the body not respond? And there are some on the carbo days, if you will. There's a little more GI distress, and there's a tinge of the acid reflux, as I mentioned earlier, but nothing, dramatic. And generally speaking, my question was, if I can maintain my weight and not run all the way back up here to 208 over one weekend kind of thing, and see what the trend line is. So here you can see, starting about the end of this period right here, is now that correlates to this time frame right here. So this is week 2, this is week 3, this is week 4, this is week 5 right here in our ranking. So I kind of ended my right here is the end of week 2. This is where I had my first fajita meal, and fajitas and rice and sweet tea for a celebration meal. And I had my my Chick-fil-A chocolate chip cookie that weekend. And so this weekend right here is right about in this time frame right here. And you can see that was the biggest part of my weight loss. But now let's go ahead and zoom to the next page here and sort of blow it up a little bit. So if we go back, what was that date? Okay, right here was sort of the 7th of May was sort of the point at which we'd been doing this for 15 days. So right in here, you can see that my carbo, bumped my weight up just a little bit over the weekend. I entered the weekend, and come Monday, it sort of was up a little bit. But this is the trend line that has continued now since the end of that 2-week, phase there. We're continuing to work our way down just slowly. You can see that if this is the weekend, and so right about in here is the weekend, right about in here's the weekend. So you can see that generally the trend is in the right direction. This is the last week right here. Okay. Now you'll notice that I had one day where I kind of dropped pretty dramatically here. This day right here to here. I believe this is due to dehydration. Normally I'm working out of the house and I drink quite a bit of fluids, and the refrigerator's close by. I can go get some ice water and whatever. And I had to go into the office, and I spent the day basically in meetings all day long, and I didn't get a lot to drink. And the next day I had lost about 2 pounds. And then when I got home that evening, or the next day when I drank the normal amount of fluids, I bounced right back up here. So you can see the significant impact that water has on your instantaneous weight. And that's why you got to track this over a period of time. A boxer can shed quite a bit of weight by sweating himself out before the weigh-in and dehydrating themselves. And then, the next day they're plumped back up with water. But since then, so this was my Thursday, I believe this is the Thursday morning reading. Wednesday was the day I was in the office. And then this is Friday and Saturday and Sunday. So you can see that, I put in a curve fit. This is the trend that I've kind of been on over the last 7 days. This is a little optimistic, continuing down. But you can see that it is tracking now. I've had about 4 days here in the 195 range. And that's where I started off, or that was my original preliminary target line, my baseline weight. I wanted to at least get back to where I had been, and then we'll decide what to do. So with that said, I've added the 185 as my goal line. So we're going to continue this week in the using the 5 and 2 mentality. We just went out and had a nice meal that had some carbs in it, and some sweet tea for lunch. And tomorrow's Memorial Day. I'll probably indulge a little bit, but I don't want to do too much. And if I can come out of this weekend at 196 and below, I'd be happy with that. And then work from 196, trying to get back down to say 194 by the end of the week, with a goal of losing 1.5 to 2 pounds a week, 1 to 2 pounds a week, whatever, so that over a 10-week span, ideally 8 to 10 weeks, that I can get down to my goal weight. And then when I hit that goal weight, I can basically just tweak a little bit of my intake to maintain it there. Or if I feel like it, maybe I'll go for something more. The lowest I would ever want to go anymore is about 175, and that would be 175 of being well muscled 175. So I think 185 is where I'm going to want to be long term. I could tolerate 195, but 185 is where I want to go, and I want to be physically, fit, strong, that sort of thing. So across this entire 5-week span, maybe I'll start to introduce a slide that shows the physical activities I've been doing. We've been doing pretty steady, either runs, walks, biking. We introduced weightlifting. I mentioned in previous video that once I hit 195 that I was going to get back in the weight room. And I was using that 195 because when you start lifting weights, you do tend to increase your weight a little. Usually it's because you overestimate how much you've done in the gym, and therefore you eat a little more than you should. And so but over time, the real change is as you add muscle's denser than fat, and you will pick up a little bit of, quote, muscle weight, and probably not offset it with enough fat weight to maintain your weight. So I wanted to get down. I don't want to ever get above 200 again. Years ago, when I first set off 10, 15 years ago, I swore I would never get over 200. And, then COVID hit me and I got over 200. And when I say COVID, I didn't get COVID during the crisis, but the whole change of lifestyle and everything, I didn't accommodate the changes in the sedentary lifestyle. And before you know it, I was, 205, 208, 210, that kind of thing. So I'm now back down to 195, and I'm going to resume my pledge to never go over 200 again, hopefully. And I'm going to use this as a goal. I'd like to get down to a more well-muscled, physically strong 185. That's kind of the goal for it. So I'll try and put together a slide to give you an idea of how much exercise that we did so far along the way. It's a fair amount, but not by no means has it been excessive or intense or in any way, This is about going out and doing zone 2 training, basically, riding your bike and still being able to have a conversation, still being able to talk, running at a pace that you can still talk to each other, which is pretty darn slow. It's almost not even a run, right? It's so slow. I can almost walk that fast. And so we're talking about zone 2 fat burning training, for those of you familiar with the heart rate zones. Very low intensity aerobic kind of stuff, as opposed to anaerobic high intensity carb, strength training and carb consuming. So that's where we stand right now. Things continue. What's encouraging is, so right about in here was the end of the 15 days, give or take. And if you look at the chart since then with the 5 and 2 mentality, I've now had multiple weekends of lasagna, fajitas, pasta, spaghetti, things like that, integrated into the occasional, a couple of Cokes and a couple of sweet teas along the way, things like that, that make life enjoyable, right? I had a dessert the other day that was absolutely divine. I don't know, it was some sort of vanilla brownie thing. It was sinful. Okay, and that was the day I lost the most weight, because that was down at the office. We went out to a restaurant and they had this, I don't know what it was, but it was fabulous. But it had to probably be 400 calories, and despite that, I lost 2 pounds. So that gives you an idea how much water weight comes into play on an instantaneous daily basis. So things are looking good, continuing to look good. The important thing is the trend is on weight loss is down. And at this point in the game, having sort of achieved these generalized things, the focus really now is on weight loss, right? It's the only metric that's substantially going to, be changeable, measurable, that sort of thing. So the good news is that trend is down. It's steady. It's down. It's not as intense. I'm not losing as much as I did in the first 2 weeks, but I'm not really trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is A, not increase, and B, over time, over weeks and weeks, to lose somewhere between 1 pound and 2 pounds a week until I get down to that goal weight. So things continue along. Next week I'll try and get a exercise slide in there so that you have some sense of what I'm doing. You don't have to do a lot. You can do walking. If you just walked every single day, like I haven't done something every single day. If you were to walk for 30 to 45 minutes every single day on top of your plan, you would probably have a similar benefit to it, to the exercising that I've been doing. So to give you an idea, so it's just not a demand that is so unreasonable that you couldn't accomplish it for yourself. One of the key things, if it's going to be sustainable, is you can't be overexerting or over focused on anything, because life is just full of distractions, and it's got to be something that's sustainable, and that's what this 5 and 2 / fitness profile has to look like. Something that happens over weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of time, and months of time, in order to avoid the yo-yo effect, to avoid losing 30 pounds, and then next thing you know, you're back up to where you were because you abandon the diet because it's not sustainable. So that's where we stand. Things continue to look reasonably good, and I'm very happy with the progress, and we'll see you again next week.